Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Integrative Health Podcast with Dr. Jen. Today, we're going to be talking to Kendra Williams. She was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2017, and she found that eating a strict gluten-free diet was very challenging due to many instances where food in restaurants contained gluten, even though they were told that it was gluten-free. After getting sick many times, she decided to train a gluten detection dog. She's been training Suki since he was 6 months old. She checks all of her food, medicine, and personal care products. She's already saved Kendra several times from getting violently ill from gluten. Suki is a Portuguese water dog who is a gluten detection dog. She checks food, medicines, and personal care products for her mom, Kendra, who has celiac disease. She raises a paw when she detects gluten and noses a leg when there is none. She was born March 20th, 2020. So welcome, Kendra. I found your story on Instagram and it's just so cool. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. So, yeah, I lived my whole life without celiac disease. I ate gluten, I ate everything, had no issues. And I mean, I think, different issues over the years, but it was very strange to me when I got very, very sick in 2017, went to lots of different doctors and they couldn't figure out what's going on with me. And I finally went to actually an integrative rheumatologist who was able to figure out that at the core of my problem, among other things, was celiac disease. So it was really strange because my diagnosis was not atypical. My number one complaint was I was coughing excessively. Like I basically had bronchitis that didn't go away for months and months and months. And even after, invasive things, I had a bronchoscopy and they were like, oh, your lungs are filled with inflammatory cells. Well, what's causing it? Oh, acid reflux. And so, it was just all this stuff that was not, it was leading me to be in a really bad place because I was so physically sick. So thankfully, I was diagnosed. I mean, it's not a good thing to get a diagnosis of a major autoimmune disease, but I got the diagnosis and then going gluten-free, I started to feel significantly better. And yeah, so that, but having never done it and then basically go, just eat gluten-free, here's a 2-page list of stuff that you can and can't have. And, good luck to you is what happens. And unfortunately, you make a lot of mistakes. And I have a social media presence, so I hear that a lot from a lot of people that when you're diagnosed with celiac disease, people just don't have any idea about the ramifications of it. And I thought that it was as simple as, you could, if you went to a place, you could remove the insides of the sandwich and eat the meat and cheese kind of thing. No, you can't do that. And I think I realized that pretty soon on, but I didn't understand the issues with cross contact because I'm somebody that ate gluten my whole life. So why would a tiny bit of gluten be causing you problems? So anytime I went out, I was getting sick and even doing my best. So one of my first meals, I went out with one of my friends and I went to a place that was recognized for being good for gluten-free. And I had a plain burger, a kale salad with a vinaigrette, just basically plain kale with a vinaigrette, and then an avocado. And I couldn't even make it home from the restaurant. I was sick. So, stuff like that, that just was kind of my day in. On one side, I felt a lot better because the coughing and some of the other physical issues were going away, but then it was not easy.
Right. Yeah, and things will say at the restaurant, it will say like now they say gluten friendly. So then they can like avoid, they're like, well, it's not good for celiac. And I'm like, so I personally, I was never tested for celiac and I'm not going to start eating gluten ever again to get the official test, but I probably did. I don't know. So I had Hashimoto's and it finally healed and my antibodies went to zero when I took out all gluten. And I can tell if I've been gluten bombed, I call it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I don't know, maybe I'm a non-celiac gluten sensitivity person instead though, and I think this is
It,
something important to talk the difference between if you want to.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's challenging. There are people that are gluten-free for other health reasons, like Hashimoto's. I also have thyroid. I had thyroid cancer. I was never
Mm,
officially diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but I'm pretty sure prior to I had Hashimoto's.
yeah.
But I no longer have a thyroid. So people for those reasons, or other autoimmune diseases like eosinophilic esophagitis is another reason a lot of people are gluten-free. So those are those reasons. And then there's non-gluten sensitivity. So my niece has non-gluten sensitivity. She's been tested for celiac disease all the way through endoscopy, is not positive, yet she reacts extremely badly with
Mm,
neurological symptoms. I mean, basically like absence seizures, really, really, really bad
wow.
if she eats
Wow.
gluten. So those are those things. So I always like to see that because sometimes people say, oh, you're non-gluten sensitivity, that's not that big of a deal. No, and I hear from people all the time, I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and they have as significant of issues as celiac disease. And who knows? There could be a tie to it too. They just never found what that all looks like. And I think the amount of research that needs to go into celiac disease. So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease where your body attacks the villi of the small intestine. So easily said. What I like to compare it to is your villi are like they are the lining of your small intestine. That they're finger-like projections. I always think of it in a healthy person as like a shag carpet, big and fluffy, and the nutrients get absorbed. But when you have celiac disease and you're not eating a gluten-free diet, those villi become blunted and fall down. That I like to describe it as tile. Like it's a
Mm,
tile floor.
mm,
There's nothing getting in there. Yeah, they're not they're, rather than this, it's,
yeah.
flat like this.
Mm,
But when you go gluten-free, then the villi grow back, and they're better, so you are able to process. The cool news for people like you, and then I have other family members that are in the same, that obviously you don't want to go through and do all the testing, because that means you have to do a gluten challenge, which is eating gluten for a number of days. They are now in testing of some blood tests where you can, and it sounds like it's very promising. I saw a doctor in Australia talk about it,
mm.
where they can test blood of people and give a definitive diagnosis of celiac disease without a
Oh,
gluten challenge. So it feels like that is right around the corner because they
I would
are
love
pretty
that.
advanced in the testing.
Yeah.
The Celiac Disease Foundation had some research on it too, so definitely check it out. I need to do a post about it because I think that's probably one of the most exciting things that I learned over in recent history, because I do find that there's a lot of people that are in your position that went gluten free, especially because most people go, oh, just go gluten free and you'll feel better. But once you go gluten free, yes, you do feel better, but they won't definitively do the tests for the endoscopy.
Right.
And there
Yeah,
is
I
also
that's really exciting because it's non-invasive too. So
correct.
that'd be a great blood test. So one post that I loved of yours was you had just talking about like the cross-contamination. Like you had a salad
Hmm.
that had a crouton on it and you took the crouton off and you don't see any gluten, but technically there's still gluten particles there.
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
it's scary because when you go to a restaurant, you have people working back there that may not understand why people are gluten free, or they might think, oh, this person just doesn't want a bun because they're doing low carb. So, oops, I forgot to take the bun off. So I'm going to they put it on by accident. So then they're going to take it off. And that can really wreck people for a couple days, a couple weeks at an immune level too in the body. So tell us like why you decided to get a gluten detection dog, and how?
Yeah, so I was just sick of getting sick, and I had learned about gluten detection dogs, and I thought, oh, this is great. And I'm someone who's always had a dog, and my dog at the time was 16 years old, so I knew he wasn't going to be around very long. And it coincided with the pandemic. So for work, I travel a lot, and nobody was traveling. So I thought,
Mm.
oh, perfect time for me to get and train a puppy. And that was kind of just, I thought this will be great. I'll do it. And, I didn't know then what I know now. So I made a lot of mistakes, I would say early on. And it was definitely a comedy of many errors, that thankfully worked out okay. But yeah, so I started I decided I'm going to get a dog, and then I'm going to find a trainer, and I'm going to train. That's not the right way to go about it. And then I started training my gluten detection dog, Suki. And so I got her in May of 2020. And it's a 2-year process to train a gluten detection dog. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so you work with an owner training, which is what I did. You work with a gluten detection trainer, somebody who specializes in it, and they meet with you via Zoom for
Mm.
1 or 2 times a week, and you do a session, and then you train on your own in the interim. So you do daily training with your dog, and depending on what you're doing, but you're training not only the gluten part, you're also training the behavior, because service
Mm.
dogs have a different level of behavior standards. So you're doing all that on a regular basis. So that's
So my Chihuahua, she passed a couple years ago. She was a service dog. And
Mhm.
yes, like lots of training, had to pass this therapy dogs international training. The hardest part was to have her sit for, I think it was like a couple minutes. I was like, don't lift your butt up. Like, because they're a Chihuahua. They're always anyway. But she
Yeah.
did it, and it was great because I could bring her to my office. We did events at the library, and it was so great. It was a lot of hard work though. So the gluten detection dogs, they're service therapy dogs plus extra training, or
No,
tell us
so
a
a
little bit how it
therapy
works.
dog is different than a service dog. A
Okay.
therapy dog provides therapy in group settings. And so the level of training on a therapy dog is very different than a service dog. A service dog is trained to help someone with their disability. So celiac disease is recognized as a disability, as are food allergies. So she is task trained. So she's trained to perform a task for me. And the task is gluten detection, or it would fall under the category of allergen detection dogs, medical alert dogs.
Mhm.
So her task is gluten detection. So that's what she does. And so she has to have all the training of behavior and service, and then she has to be trained in that task of gluten detection. And it's actually multiple tasks, because she checks plates, bowls, cups, so food empty, like in a restaurant. She checks my medicine, and then she also checks packages of food. So when I go grocery shopping, she checks the food in the package before I buy it. Or when I bring it home, she checks the packages before I put them away. So
Walk us through the training a little bit. And it's 2 years minimum, right? If someone out there is listening, like, I would love to do this, like, could they do it with their dog that's 5 years old? Could they do it with any breed of dog? How does this
I,
work?
I don't recommend doing it with an older dog like that, because it takes 2 years, and then you got into a point where it's a lot of work for the dog. Like, just the sniffing takes a ton of energy. It is
Oh.
more than an hour of exercise sometimes for the sniffing. It just requires that much brain power and things. That's why trainers recommend sniffing games for puppies to get them to work off some of their energy. So generally it gets into when you get into upper ages like that, and granted, 5 is not old, Suki's 4, but you have to worry about their physical ability. So Suki travels with me, she goes places, she's doing a lot more than she would do when she's home. So, on a day like today, I'm working all day, she's laying on the couch or laying in her bed, and we
Right.
go for walks. But if I'm going to a conference or a trade show or meetings, she's walking through airports with me. So it's physically demanding, and that ends up being a lot for a dog the older they get. As far as breeds go, you really do need to be selective of breeds. There are breeds that are probably easier, more capable of doing it. You definitely don't want, you want a dog that is going to be engaged with the work and ability to work. Um, so, normally service dogs, you look at labs, Goldens, and poodles. Those tend to be the main ones of service dog work because they're temperament wise, the ability to do it. But finding the right breed for you has to be based on the person as well. So, what your needs are, what your abilities are, because some people might have additional physical limitations, they might have limitations of where they live and things like that.
So talk about the trainer, I guess. So, because I'm sure some people listening out there are like, wow, like I'm all in, I want to do this. So you said you worked with a trainer via Zoom,
Yeah,
2 hours or 2 sessions a week.
1 to 2, depending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So
sorry, is this
okay.
someone that could assist you, be like, this is something that I want for my family or one of their kids or something? Could they assist you with the breed and like with suggestions on how to start out?
That's 100% what I recommend. So I'm actually in the process of launching some courses
Mm,
to help answer a lot of those questions. The idea behind it is I made all the wrong mistakes. So I got a dog first. I didn't know my dog breed would not be one that I would recommend for people
mm,
because of their needs, and they're just harder to train because they're super smart. She's a Portuguese water dog. I chose a breeder, chose a dog on my own, not good. Then I went to a trainer who was a service dog trainer who said, "Oh, I can train gluten detection." The thing she told me to do put my health at risk.
Oh,
Yeah, so all those things, and I hear stories of people all the time that went
mhm.
to a trainer that ended up with a really sad. I mean, I'm working on an interview I just did with a gal that, her she was left with a dog wasn't even trained, and she was sold a dog that wasn't even trained. So I
Oh,
recommend
wow.
working with a trainer and doing owner training, and a trainer that is specifically trained in gluten and allergen detection.
Hmm.
Because unlike regular dog training, so you said you trained your service dog, you're learning behaviors, sit, stay, being calm, maybe doing, tasks like alert tasks, jumping up, or
Hmm.
alerting to a behavior or things like that. Those are pretty typical service dog tasks. Where gluten and allergen detection, you are 50% of the thing. So how your body is positioned, how you hold a plate, how you hold a package, what kind of signals you give to the dog. You cannot check yourself during the training process without someone. Because I mean, and I see videos of people all the time where I'm like, ooh, they're totally signaling that dog. And
Oh.
yeah, so it's really important. So you work with a trainer that's trained in gluten and allergen detection, and then they're watching you and they will say, "Okay, you did this." And there's so many things that are unconscious to you. And there was one point, how frequently you change out the samples or what the pattern that you have. So as you're doing training, you're presenting gluten samples and gluten-free samples over time, and all of a sudden you're going, "Wow, I didn't realize that every time I do 2 gluten-frees and a gluten," and dogs can pick up on those patterns. And those are things as a handler you don't think about. And it's important then to have somebody going, "Wow, you did that." Or, "Hey, did you know you moved your left leg forward a half a centimeter?" And
It's almost like a lie detection test, like
a
with the
hundred,
dogs.
100%. And dogs are so
Wow.
much more
Yeah.
intent on your body
Pleasing the owner.
language
Yeah.
than voice. They're not listening to your words. They're
Mm-hmm.
much more feed off of, oh, you tilted your head to the right a little bit, or, you scrunched up your face, and all those things. That's why you want to work with a trainer. And the other part is it's your health as well. If the dog is not trained properly, they're going to make mistakes that are going to impact your health, and you don't want to mess with that. As one of my friends who is a gluten detection trainer, she said, you're not going to just, perform heart surgery or want your heart surgery performed by somebody that's not a heart surgeon, right? You're not
Yeah.
going to go to your general practitioner to do heart surgery. And that's kind of what it is.
Oh,
And
I agree. I mean, I see it in the integrative functional space. People will
exactly.
just say, "Oh yeah, I'm an expert," and they took a weekend course, or they don't even see patients, or you have to be careful and due diligence out there, because there's people, they just want your money, so they're gonna say whatever. But this is about your health, and like you said, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine spending not only money but training hours, and the dog wasn't trained the right way.
A hundred
So that
percent.
would not be, that would not be good.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. So I partnered with one of my friends who's a gluten and allergen detection, actually with two gluten and allergen detection trainers, to put together kind of a baseline of here's the things you should know going into it. And to really help, because it's a major commitment. Once you decide, I mean, you get the dog, you're committed for the dog's life, right?
Yeah.
And if you're doing the training, and depending on how you do it, a lot of the horror stories I hear are people that, well, I got a dog that was fully trained, so they're out the money
Right. Okay.
100%. The owner
That,
trains
yes, that was my question. Can someone just pick a dog up that's already trained in this?
They do have those.
Okay.
I personally don't necessarily think that's the right way to go, just because you're 50% of the deal. And so you don't have that level of trust with your dog as you do as you build it. So, and
Mhm.
you're also not as able to read the dog. People do it, and there are programs out there, but I really truly believe, because you're going to also be ongoing maintenance training your dog, and it's not, you have to keep up with it. So I think it's best to do the owner training with the trainer. But and there's also cost differences too. When you got the fully trained, they're training that dog for a year or 2 years before you are even engaging with the dog, or you might be going there for a week or so at a time to do
Mhm.
some sessions. And generally that's like one big chunk out of pocket. One thing is I like about the owner training is you're doing it basically on a pay-as-you-go basis, on a monthly basis for the training that you're taking. So I do think that too, financially, is a way better way for most people. I mean, it definitely was for me.
Now, this may be a random question, but I mean, this is a medical thing, and like having a gluten detection dog would keep you out of the hospital maybe, or something. Does insurance help
Um,
with any of this
and
or cover
and
anything?
unfortunately
Of
not.
course not. Why would they?
Why
Insurance
would they?
sucks.
I mean,
Sorry.
some people have said they've used their
HSA.
HSA
Okay.
plans for
We'll
it.
take that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So some of those, now I personally have not. I'm self-employed, so
Yeah.
I don't have an HSA, but I know some people who have. You can do some deductions. I just had a conversation where I some people were asking me those questions on Instagram, and a CPA wrote me, but the challenge is it has to be more than 10% of your income, which most people, the general deduction is going to be, more than what that cost is. So
Yeah.
depending on where you are and what you're doing in that time.
Right. So who would benefit from a gluten detection dog? Because I know you said you travel a lot, so that makes perfect sense. You're eating out more. I mean,
Yeah.
does everyone with celiac or even non-celiac gluten sensitivity with, severe reactions, who would benefit from one of these dogs?
I think the big thing is first of all, if you are continuing to have issues and your celiac is unresolved, I think people, especially like with refractory celiac disease that is not treatable, that would be that's a huge one. I would say people that continue to have issues that cannot be addressed with changing the things, people who want a different level of competence. It's not the same as just having it's not a quick little, hey, I'm gonna just test this and see, and it's all well and good. Because it requires ongoing maintenance and you're taking a dog with you. So it's work. So you
Mhm.
also have to make sure that you have the capability and the time in your life to devote to a dog and to take care of a dog, because it's a living, breathing being that you do have to, take care of and work with. And it's not just a device that you're sitting on the machine or an assistive, I mean, technically under the law, they're medical devices, but it's not the same as, a walker, right? It's something that, a walker you can put in the corner and you don't have to feed it or water it or exercise it or, do anything like that. And a dog requires all that. So you have to have that capability. I would say for me, the benefit of having her even at home, and going to people's houses and things like that is I did not realize after diagnosis what a mental load it was every time I ate. So
Mhm.
the stress of eating and I'd be at meals and I'd go, unless I'd prepared it,
Mhm.
it's a 50-50 that I'm going to get sick off this food. And
Yeah.
you don't realize how that affects you mentally.
Mm.
So I will say that's probably the biggest thing for me. The other thing that has been the huge for me is she checks all my medicine because I have been sickened by medicine,
Mhm.
with gluten in medicine. And so that's another one that you can't test it. You can't know. You can call, but frankly, the medicines that I was sickened off of, well, the one I was sickened off, one she alerted to, they both said there was no gluten in their
Right. Oh.
in their pills. So you just don't know. You really just don't know.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up like the emotional aspect. And I was just at a conference a couple weeks ago and I was like, "Hey, what's gluten-free?" Because my husband's like, "It's meat. It's going to be gluten-free." I'm like, "Not always. They
Mm-mm.
put nasty stuff in." And it would be great. Like it's really cool that you have Suki because you could just have her check because it literally takes 10 minutes sometimes for like if you're at a conference for them to go back because it's not labeled and check. And then even if it is labeled, sometimes I'm like, that looks a little sketch. And I double check. Are you sure there's no gluten in there? I'll get sick. And they're like, okay, I'll check with the chef. I love it when the chef comes out to talk to me. That's when I have respect. But you don't want to get sick. I try to tell my husband, I'm like, when I get gluten exposure, like I feel bad. I feel it in my bones. And then that's just inflammatory. I don't want that. So it is really hard for those people that suffer with celiac, with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, because not everyone understands. They're just like, whatever. And you have to deal with the consequences. So that makes it
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Now,
And
when you,
oh,
sorry.
sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like, how do people respond to Suki and you in this? I mean, do some people like get offended if because I don't think people understand that if you prepare the food in like if you go to a friend's house and they have made other things with gluten, but they made you something special gluten-free, it still could register with gluten. Like, has that happened to you? That would be kind of
Yes. Yes.
embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
Or
It's
for
hard.
them, I mean,
It's
but
hard. Yeah, I had a friend who actually is a nurse. Awesome, awesome person, super supportive. And we had a potluck, which actually was at my house, like at the pool in my neighborhood. And she understands and she knew and she goes, I looked at all the labels of everything and everything was gluten-free. And I was like, this is great. And I'm still and nothing that she made technically had gluten,
Right.
because she said she verified that. Suki checked it and it had gluten in it.
Oh,
Another time, and I was on a trip with some friends, and they are gluten free. They don't have celiac, but they're gluten free for
yeah.
other health reasons, and so they know, and they're super careful. And we had Suki check the sausages before they put them on the grill, and I was super tired, so I didn't tell them, hey, cook mine on foil, or,
Mm,
put something under mine. And so they cooked them on the grill, came back up, and Suki alerted to gluten in the sausages because of the cross-contamination of the grill
mm,
at the Airbnb. So all those things, yeah, it's you just don't know. And even people that are 100% trying their best to make sure, they're still risking eating that food. So her checking makes, I think most people that care and understand are great about it. They're fine with it. It's interesting in restaurants and stuff. I feel like oftentimes they take my questions more seriously. So I still, if I'm going somewhere, what I like to tell people is she doesn't make the food inherently safer. She just lets me know that if it's safe to eat or not. So if I go to a restaurant, I still have to ask all the questions about preparation. I still have to ask ingredients. I still have to, do my due diligence beforehand. But then when it comes out, I have the reassurance that it's going to be safe because she's going to tell me if it has gluten or not. And in those cases, they don't just, sometimes you go to a restaurant and they kind of almost roll their eyes because you're just being difficult. And I live in California, and in California, there's a lot of, I call them lifestyle gluten-free people that are
mm,
gluten-free for lifestyle choices, and it has no health ramifications. So they
right.
might be gluten-free, I don't want the bread, so please take away the bread plate. But then when the dessert comes out, ooh, that
Oh,
layered chocolate cake sounds really good, or that brownie sounds good. Let me get that, or let me
yeah.
have a bite of that. As someone with celiac disease, that's not me. And that's
Right.
going to make me extremely ill. And I'm never going to just have a bite. I'm never even
Right.
going to just touch something. So as far as a tiny, I don't want even a piece of bread touching my food, because that's going to make me sick too. Um, so having her makes those restaurants take me a bit more seriously and go, okay, this is a real deal. Yeah.
That's great. Now she's a big dog. How do you travel with her? Does she have to, can she come with you on the regular
Yeah.
like passenger airplane area and just do you
Yes.
have to buy her an extra seat or how does that work?
No, under the law, service dogs are allowed to travel in the passenger cabin. So pets are not, unless they're in a carrier and placed
Hmm.
underneath the seat. But service dogs travel. So she's trained. She goes underneath the seat, or if I sit at the bulkhead, she just goes at my feet at the bulkhead.
Okay.
And she just lays there and sleeps, and she goes with me, and I just have to pack everything for her. So I'm packing, food and treats and
Yeah.
booties and all, brushes, and anything that I need for her goes with me on the travel.
So she is never not like you've never taken a trip without her since.
Yes, no, I have.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have. I have. It depends on where I'm going. So I just did a celiac cruise this summer,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it was in Europe, and it was super hot, and I'd never taken a cruise before, and I didn't think a cruise ship and in and out of really hot cities in Europe would be the best place for her. So she
Mhm.
stayed home and had a vacation. And then I had a vacation too, because I didn't have to worry about her
Yeah.
while I was on the trip. Mainly, it was safe because, it was a celiac cruise, so the whole dining
Right.
was 100% gluten-free. I've had some work travel for where I was teaching some classes. So I've flown on those trips without
Mhm.
her, mainly because I'm teaching a class for 8 hours. That is
Mhm.
stressful for me to worry
Mhm.
about her and how she's going to behave when I'm trying to give my best to my work. So
Mhm.
in those instances, I've left her behind.
Yeah,
But
because at the end of the day, this, like you were saying, this is a pet, another life to take care of. So it's so cool though. I just love what you do, and you're bringing more awareness to celiac disease, which is great.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a lot, like you were saying, when you go out to eat, it's a lot of anxiety because you don't want to get sick. So it's so great that Suki is there for you to enjoy eating out again.
100%. And when I go on these trips without her, I miss her terribly. Like it does, that stress comes back to me.
Mm.
And you have other things where you're like, "Ooh, I hope this is safe." So I went on a trip to Chicago and I ordered at a restaurant, and I also had a NEMA sensor, so I tested with it, and those would always frustrate me because it takes like 6 minutes to get a result. And then the result is not, it's usually inconclusive when I do it. But I know a lot of people love that technology. Anyway, I was not well after, like I'm pretty sure that had some minor cross contact of that food. But it's like you're hungry, you have to eat. And I'm like, oh, if she was here, she would have told me conclusively one way or the other, and I wouldn't have felt bad. But it wasn't a bad cross contact. So
Good. Okay, what do you do when your food comes out? They say it's gluten-free. You did all the due diligence asking, and then she says, Suki's like, "Yep, there's gluten on there." Like, what are the like waiters' responses and the chefs and stuff? Like, what happens? Do they send it back and try again? Has it ever twice had gluten? Like, how do you handle those situations, I guess?
yeah, I usually just tell them, and depending on what it is and what my level of confidence is. So if it's a place that I'm like, it was sketchy to begin with, then I'm just like, well, whatever. So I went with a celiac friend recently to a Mexican restaurant, and they're like, it had good reviews and stuff, but it was one of those where some of their answers were a little bit weird. And the friend who's celiac, she's like a restaurant expert. So she was asking really good questions, and she's like, and she trains restaurants. So
Oh, you have cool friends, because
yeah, yeah.
I'm the weird one when we go out, I'm like asking all these questions, and everyone's just staring at me and I don't care.
Well, that's with my regular friends. This is one of
Yeah.
my internet celiac friends. This
Oh,
is
love it.
Celiac with Kayla.
Love it.
Anyway, we asked them a bunch of questions, and then they came back, and the chips Suki alerted to that they said they had fried earlier. Afterwards, we thought about it, and we should have tested some outside of the basket because it might have been the basket that was contaminated. But
Got it.
then they had said, yeah, the tortillas, we ordered the same thing. We ordered chicken tacos, super plain, but they said we'd be better off using just the lettuce wrap for the lettuce tacos instead of the tortillas, because the tortillas were cooked in the same area. So we're
Right.
like, great. So 2 tacos each. One of the tacos Suki alerted to for gluten, and we tested it multiple times. So it's just, we
Interesting.
just put that aside. She took it home to her boyfriend and he ate it. That's usually, frankly, to be honest, what I do. If something is, I will let them know. There's other areas where I've had them redo it and come back.
Now, do
But
you alert reviews like for people on this, or, because it's hard, because it's like you don't want to slam the business, but you also don't want people to get hurt.
yeah, it's really hard. I tend not to recommend places 100% unless they're like wholeheartedly, unless they're 100% gluten free, because there's so many variables to them, right?
Yeah, right.
Uh, I ate recently with a friend at a breakfast place, and they said all the right things, and the meal was fine, but the gluten-free toast had gluten on it.
Oh,
So
maybe same toaster, maybe.
no, they said they had a gluten-free toaster, but
Weird.
who knows if people are pulling that bread, that gluten-free bread, with
With their
gloves
hand.
that touch the
Yeah.
gluten. There could be any point if they're pulling bread from a gluten loaf, putting it on a plate, and then pulling bread from the gluten-free. then maybe they've contaminated the bread that way. I don't know. It gets to be really hard. So some of those,
Right.
I put those down as reviews, but that's so random. And
Yeah.
and for the most part, the main of the meal was fine. The
Right.
other part is the dogs can detect down to lower amounts
Mm,
than, what is considered safe. So you can eat, the research is 20 parts per million in a day, which is still not very much. But, is what she alerted to more or less. So I,
mm.
I find that more often than not, she gives me the all clear if I'm doing my due diligence and I'm asking all the right questions.
Got it. Yes.
So she's given me a lot more confidence in eating out than I had before.
Yes. I love
Um,
it. That's amazing. Well, everyone has to go check you out, Kendra and Suki, on your Instagram because I love watching your reels. They're fun. And you do great teaching on there. So why don't you tell everyone how they could find you and Suki and best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so SukiPWD.com is my website. On Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, every single one of those is under Suki, which is SUKI PWD for Portuguese water dog. And those are all the ways to get a hold of me. And um, our courses are going to be launching soon. So probably by the time this
Yeah.
comes out, if you're interested in getting a gluten detection dog, that's a great way to start to give you the information you need. And also just to figure out, hey, is it right for me? We go through that you can really look at. Is it right for you? Are you ready for it in your life and where you are?
I love it. Well, today was so informative. I've learned so much about gluten detection dogs. So really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate the opportunity.